If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What's the scariest thing that's happened to you at 3 a.m.? This happened a year ago. My family was all asleep at 3 a.m. when I awoke to scratching at the front door. I peeked through the window to find a beaten, bloody young woman, sitting cross-legged on my front step, staring back at me. It was my neighbor. Her left eye was swollen shut, she had a laceration on her head. I opened the door and tried to get her to come inside. She was extremely drunk, and hardly wearing anything on this windy, rainy day. She was babbling and not making any sense. I called 911, but when she realized I was calling for help, she screamed and climbed over my chain-link fence, flopping onto the ground. She ran down the street, flailing her arms, screaming. I thought her boyfriend had beat her up. They had known domestic violence issues. Come to find out, earlier that day, she got rip-roaring drunk, then tripped and hit her head on concrete. The laceration on her head actually had stitches in it already, which I couldn't see in the dark. When she got home from the ER, she stole her roommate's whiskey and pounded most the bottle. Then, she just went berserk. Awoke to the sound of my sweet golden retriever barking furiously at the partially open bedroom door. Snarling, snapping and barking. I was so scared that someone was in the house. I got out of bed and turned on the light. He was barking at a plastic bag I'd hung on the doorknob. I guess he saw the silhouette in the dark or something. I checked the whole house and all was clear and normal. Scared me to death. I sure do miss that goofy dog. My dog was going ballistic at our side door. I yelled for her to come to me, but she refused to leave it and kept barking, which was really unusual behavior for he. As I come down the steps, I see a big-ass dude standing on the other side of the door, fiddling with the knob and trying to get in. My heart stopped. I asked what he wanted, and he paused and looked at me surprised, as though he hadn't realized I could see him. I wouldn't have been able to if I hadn't been on the steps. He said he was looking for somebody. I tried to sound hard and said I already called the cops. He called me a bitch and turned and ran off into the night. What scared me the most was he knew I was awake, and he knew the dog was in there, and he still tried to come in. That only tells me he had a plan for dealing with us, or was crazy enough to not care. I woke up to the sounds of two people burgling my house, jumped out of bed, grabbed my bat and went to investigate. As soon as they heard me, they legged it. I then phoned the police. As soon as I got off the phone, I went into shock, sitting on my bedroom floor in my boxers clutching a bat in case they came back. They never did, but that was 3 years ago now, and still to this day if I hear even the slightest sound at night, I'm fully alert and waiting for it to happen again. The paranoia has stayed with me since that evening. I fell asleep and woke up to the door being bashed in and doorbell being smashed. In my sleepiness I thought it was my sister after forgetting her key after taking the dog out. I didn't realize it was like 2/3 am. I get up when I think nobody is getting up to let her in. I go down and open the door. And this barely dressed girl falls in on top of me. I grab her and shove her out the door, out of the porch and into the arms of a guy standing in our front garden. I blink and look at them and the taxi's still waiting outside. The girl is completely fucked drunk and the guy is so confused. I tell him wrong house and he proceeds to drag the girl over the low garden wall. We had a small gate and they didn't seem to use it, and get into the taxi and leave. To this day my dad always brings it up. He thinks they were scoping out the place to rob the place and that was their cover to get someone to open the door. It was the 4th or 5th night that I'd spent in my new apartment, having recently moved from San Francisco to Baton Rouge. While the two cities weren't nearly as dissimilar as I'd feared, there were still a number of differences between them. Like the cacophony of insects that seemed to be perpetually present outside my bedroom window. To make matters worse, I hadn't yet received my furniture, which meant that I was sleeping, or at least attempting to sleep, on an air mattress, so the combination of sounds and sensations was working wonders at keeping me awake. On its own, this set of circumstances was certainly annoying, but not at all scary. That changed when a new sound reached my ears, as I was lying there, trying to mentally drown out the bug-based chorus. An utterly alien noise pierced through the night, its nature not unlike a low, mournful howl crossed with the deepest and most furious bark I'd ever encountered. If you were to imagine a bear shouting in anguish and rage, you wouldn't be far off from envisioning what I heard. And if you were to then dump a glass of ice water down your spine, you'd have a decent idea of how it made me feel. Maybe I was just homesick, or maybe a lack of sleep had left me more sensitive to strange sounds in the darkness. Either way, I was suddenly gripped by panic, wondering what could be out there. I knew that Louisiana was home to alligators, and I wondered if I was hearing the hunting cries of one. Although the rational part of my mind tried to argue that an oversized lizard couldn't possibly enter my house, I was nonetheless frozen by a variety of fear that I hadn't felt since I was a child. Even during an earlier night in that location, when I thought I had heard someone trying to break in, I had been less terrified than the noise had made me. The call echoed through the night at least once more, and although I'm sure that my mind was playing tricks on me, it almost sounded like it was moving closer. I gripped my covers, straining my ears to listen for any approaching footsteps or dragging tails, but the discordant symphony of six-legged vermin masked anything else. Fatigue eventually caught up with me, and I drifted off into that restless variety of sleep that one suffers when their mind is still reeling from the effects of adrenaline. The next morning, after the insect orchestra had decided to observe an intermission, I stumbled out my front door, intent on walking the 20 or so meters to my mailbox. As soon as my slipper-clad feet touched my welcome mat, though, the otherworldly sound from the previous night echoed through the air again. Only this time, I recognized it as being the call of an irritated-sounding cow. Suffice to say, the feeling was mutual. At the time I had a bedroom on the top floor of the house, with a skylight right above my bed. I loved that skylight. You could see the stars and the moon and the occasional meteor. Anyway, one night around 3 I was awakened by the most hellish noise, and I could see through the window that the trees outside were dancing in wind. Suddenly a blinding light came through the skylight and the whole room was filled with a bluish light. I had no idea what was going on. End of the world? Jesus come to get me? Then I realized the hellish noise was a helicopter and the light was one of those searchlights they use. I know those are common in cities, but I live in a rural area. The light clicked off, the helicopter flew away. The next morning I hear from a sheriff's deputy that a man had broken into a house a mile or so away, had injured the homeowner, then had run off into the night, so they were searching the woods and nearby farms with a helicopter and light. I watched Grave Encounters on Netflix, which I actually found pretty scary. I then went out to the kitchen to get something to eat when a hand came out of the doorway to the basement and curled around the door jamb. I screamed. It scared the hell out of me. Turned out it was my mom doing laundry in the basement. She has bad knees, so I guess sometimes when she's coming up the stairs she grabs the door jamb to help pull herself up. She laughed for like 20 minutes. She was startled too, but then found it hilarious. The doorway is at a right angle to the stairs, you go up the stairs and the doorway is to the right, which is why I could only see her hand. Someone banging on my door. Very intently, for quite a while. Whoever it was covering up the peephole. They had to have specifically come to my apartment, second floor, building in the center of the complex, etc., not someplace a drunk person would have wandered, and my neighborhood wasn't near bar/party areas anyway, and whoever it was left immediately and drove off when I didn't answer. Never figured out who it was, but several months later I heard banging around midnight, 1 a.m. and looked out the peephole to see a pretty rough-looking younger white man angrily banging on my neighbor's door. My neighbor was an older kind of bougie black woman who lived alone, had no children, had no family in the area, and kept to herself. I suppose they could have been acquainted in some way, but I really don't think they looked like people who'd be casual friends. I watched and she never answered the door, and the man eventually left and drove off. I wonder if he was the person who'd knocked on my door before, but I still couldn't guess at a motive in either instance because I'd never seen him before. Me being an 8-year-old kid sleeping peacefully. Don't know why, but I woke up. It was weird. No sounds, no movement, everyone was asleep and there was silence. Wasn't dreaming at all. Just woke up out of the blue. Suddenly I hear footsteps outside my window and someone started knocking on the window. The window had wooden doors at that time. I turned the lights on. I'm scared shitless. I stared at the window and out of nothing this starts doing ghost sounds going you. I lit the biggest dad ever and my father just jumped off bed and I hear someone running. My dad went outside with a baseball bat. No one was there. My neighborhood had some abandoned houses where junkies would usually occupy. Guess he was checking if someone was in the house because a few years later we had 2 occasions where 2 guys tried to enter our house. One was scared by a random street cleaner, bless him, and the other one got his ass kicked by my mother. A few years ago, I think I was maybe 18, I was in a really bad situation as far as living goes, and I like to take really long walks out at night. One night, I was in a field at about 3 a.m. and saw an owl perched atop a dead tree. It eyed me for a good minute and a half before taking off. Owls have always made me uneasy, so I decided to head home. On the way back, and on the darkest road possible, 2 dogs came up to the street from my right. At first I thought they were wolves. They really looked it, but one was solid black, the other solid white. They didn't look at me, and they didn't approach me. They just stood at the edge of the road as I walked by. For some reason, I was terrified. I looked straight ahead as well. After I passed, they started walking across the street behind me and just kept going. Now I know this doesn't sound scary to most people, but my late father and I are Chickamauga Cherokees, and it's very reminiscent of an old story he'd once told me about. More of an eye-opener than a suspenseful fright, but I don't remember ever being that scared before or after that. It was December 2010. My cousin, who lives in San Francisco, had invited my younger brother and I to go and visit. He had just recently gotten married, and he wanted us to meet his new wife. So we decide to go. He pays the tickets, we pack up, and by sundown, we're all ready to leave the next morning. We fall asleep. Suddenly, I wake up. My dad is sitting at the foot of my bed, shaking me awake and calling my name. I'm thinking he's about to ask if we were ready to go. No. Apparently, a woman had knocked at the door that morning. She was wearing all black, and she looked, according to my father, very sketchy. It was about 3 a.m. when she knocked on the door and asked my father, "Does Tim live here?" Tim will be my name for the remainder of the story. So my dad just freaked out. How does she know my son? He wonders. He probes a bit further. How old is he? She gives him what was my exact age at the time. My dad freaks out a bit more. None of us know who this woman is, and here she is, spouting off information about me? Fine, then what's his last name? This apparently stumps her, and she takes out her phone to call someone. Give me a moment, she says, walking away from the door. My dad just eyes her skeptically from afar. Suddenly, she gets back into her car and drives away without another word. What the? So my dad asked me if I knew who she was. I said I had no clue. He then began suspecting I had ordered some prostitute. I asked him why I would ever do a thing like that. I then suggested it was perhaps a prank from one of my friends. But, I didn't have any friends that would do something like that. So here, we have no idea who this woman is, or why she knew my name. Keep in mind, it is currently 4 a.m. in the morning. Our flight leaves at 10 a.m. We wake my brother up, which was the dumbest mistake we ever made, and tell him the news. Somehow, he gets scared. He was already nervous about flying to begin with. Now we have this mystery woman chasing us? He declines to fly that morning. My blood boils, because I really wanted to go. I try, with every effort on my part, to try and convince my brother to still go. Then my dad chimes in, and agrees that maybe we shouldn't go. He was paranoid that the lady was keeping an eye on us. I ask him, how are we important? What would she need us for? My dad leaves for work, and now I'm stuck trying to reconvince my brother to go. I didn't want to go without him. I call up my cousin and tell him the news. He tries his best to convince my brother to go anyways. No luck. So we end up not going. That Christmas, my family did nothing. All because of some stupid prostitute or something who was at the wrong place, at the wrong time. Woke up to someone banging hard on my door at like 2:30 a.m., followed by my door being slammed open and a guy yelling he's gonna fucking kill me. Grabbed my gun, flashlight and waited for him to open the bedroom door, popped the strobe on and started screaming at him to get on the ground. Call the cops, he got arrested, he was also at the wrong house, no one actually wanted to kill me, just the guy his wife was cheating on him with. Yeah. Deadbolt, steel core front door with reinforced door frame is a must now, and the gun still stays on my nightstand with a strobing flashlight. When I was about 5 or 6 I woke up and saw an old woman standing in the doorway of my bedroom. She didn't say anything, just looked at me silently and stood there, but I was filled with the most horrible sense of dread I've ever felt in my life. I was absolutely terrified of this woman, and I hid under my covers and would peek out every few minutes to see if she was there. After what felt like hours, but was probably only like 15 minutes, she was gone when I looked. I ran into my parents' room crying and my dad searched my room and the rest of the house but didn't find anyone. I slept with them for the rest of the night. I never did find a good explanation for what I saw, but a lot of other weird things happened in the house before we moved a few years later. Scariest thing I've ever seen to this day. We temporarily had a roach infestation at our old place and it was always scary trying to walk to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It was a tiny studio and the closest light to the bed was across the room in our kitchenette. I woke up in the middle of the night and turned the light on while facing the bathroom. Resting on the bathroom door frame were 2 big flying cockroaches. I live in Hawaii where the roaches are huge. They must have been mating partners. My strategy was to grab the raid that I kept in the kitchenette, spray them both and then run to the bed. Walked over slowly, sprayed them, first one fell and ran into the bathroom shower and the second one decided to seek revenge. I backed up towards the other side of the room and this thing starts flying and dive bombs me right in the chest, falling on its back by my feet. My boyfriend wakes up from all the commotion and finishes them off with a slipper and flushes them. That infestation took a while to take care of and it caused a tremendous amount of stress not knowing when you'll get dive bombed or have one end up in your bed with you. Okay, forgive me, but this is an hour later around 4:15 a.m. I decided to go for a run, so I set out at about 4 a.m. and as I was passing a local park I noticed a man loitering in the only light at the park. Now I'm a pretty fast runner, fast enough that I was never worried about other people when running because I was confident I was in better shape than any potential assailants. That being said, as I made eye contact, or what I perceived to be eye contact as I could only make out skin color due to my speed and the distance between us, I decided to up my pace and move into the empty street. As I passed the man and moved into a patch of poorly lit street, I heard footsteps behind me. I kept running and eventually looked back and caught a glimpse of something behind me, let out a loud scream, and sprinted about 1.5 miles to a well-lit street with a decent amount of cars before I finally stopped and re-evaluated how I was going to get home. I decided to go the extra mile, literally, and go around the street where I saw the man, but I never escaped the feeling I was being watched/chased the entire way home. It didn't help that I'm a true crime nerd and could only think of Jeffrey Dahmer retelling his jogger story. A few years back I was awake at that time, walking around my house in the dark, contemplating that due to family issues and my job I had to be up at that hour. I had just passed the front door of my house when someone smashed into the door like they were trying to break it down. I freaked the fuck out, looking for a handy weapon as I assumed someone is about to smash down the door and murder everyone in the house. No further attempts at breaching the house occur, and when my ride for work arrived a few hours later I can't find any sign of the break-in attempt. About a year later I finally share the event with my father. Rather than dismissing it, as he often does with any threat to security, he proceeds to tell me the story of how he had a similar occurrence years earlier, only in that instance someone was pounding on the side of the house as he sat in the dark in the living room. This really wasn't a story I should have shared before going to bed, as now I've freaked myself out. I woke up because the dogs were going bananas, milling around under the bedroom window. They weren't barking, but just whining and clearly agitated. I decided I better go outside and see what had them so wound up. I grabbed a flashlight and armed myself with a hammer and proceeded to creep out the back door and around to the back of the house. I looked all around and couldn't see anything or smell anything. I initially thought they might be worked up over a skunk. Just when I was about to give up and go back in, I heard a blood-curdling scream. Almost simultaneously another scream behind me and another to my right. I nearly shat. I thought, holy fuck, whatever it is, they've got us surrounded. I cautiously peered over the privacy fence and saw the biggest fox I've ever seen, trotting down the road. I realized at that moment that when it screamed, it had echoed off the buildings on each side, making it sound like there were 3 of them. I was 16 and pretty damn high, walking home along the old country road that leads from my friend's house to my house, maybe 20 minutes past woods, horse pastures and the lake. Of course it's pitch black, no moon and overcast skies. But I was used to it, and even though I'd been chased by wild dogs before and seen copperheads, cottonmouths, rabid skunks, etc., I was honestly more afraid of some redneck creep pulling up beside me than anything. See, there wasn't much to the road beyond asphalt, just deep ditches with brambles, then barbed wire and shit. So if some creep came driving up I didn't have many options to run. But everything was fine and I was thinking of what delicious snack I'd be soon making until all of a sudden I hear a bunch of bushes rustling, something big rustling around, then a rapid clack, 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 clack coming straight at me. It was a goddamn deer running across the road about 10 feet ahead. Scared the fuck out of me, mostly because I knew it was big and close, but I couldn't see it, and apparently when I'm stoned deer hooves sound like the clicks of Satan's hooves. A few months ago I was on antidepressants and the side effects were outweighing the benefits. I still don't know if it was a side effect of the antidepressant, a side effect of me quitting them too quickly, or a side effect of a stomach virus I was recovering from, had caused so much exhaustion I had passed out and needed stitches across my eyebrow the week prior, so maybe even a concussion. Anyways, I started having visual and audible hallucinations. Now, I used to festival hop and have done my fair share of experimental drugs. This was like nothing else. I, at one point, thought that I had died and come back to life, that the CDC was trying to find me, and that I needed to run away. I drove several hours away, got lost in the middle of nowhere, and couldn't get my phone to work. I ended up thinking I had dead people in my car with me and that I was being chased by another car. I wrecked my car in the parking lot of that town's police station, thinking I was in danger at about 3 a.m. I have never been more confused or scared in all of my life. They ended up charging me with a DUI because of my state, which I'm still waiting on court for. Can't really blame them, but my blood will come back clean. My car was fixable, and my mental health is slowly but surely stabilizing. Seriously though, the feeling of actually realizing you are losing your mind is horrifying. There were moments in the police station that people would reappear and disappear with every blink. Just that overwhelming dread of not knowing what was real and what was an illusion is awful. Fell asleep on the couch, woke up around 3:30 a.m., still half asleep. I grabbed a drink, turned the lights out and was about to head up when I paused in the living room for a second. Meanwhile, outside, the newspaper lady had just pulled up and fired a Saturday edition from her car off the front aluminum screen door of the house. The bang it made was so loud I thought someone shot a gun off behind my head. I swear there was a flash as well, but I don't know. Wife found me in the morning curled up in a ball right where I was standing. We don't speak about that incident anymore. One of my friends was blacked out drunk sleeping in a room upstairs. He woke up and tried to go downstairs, where a group of us were hanging out. He tripped at the top of the stairs and swan dived face first all the way to the bottom of the steps. We all watched him fall and land, and afterwards was just stunned silence. A huge pool of blood started forming underneath him as we tried to figure out what to do. We should have called an ambulance immediately, but the problem was every single person in the house was tripping balls and had no clue how to handle the situation. Luckily 5 to 10 minutes after the fall, two of our friends walk into the door completely sober, randomly coming through to say what's up. It was a party house while I was in college, so not completely unexpected, but still extremely lucky. They drove him to the hospital where we found out he had 16 fractures in the face, broken wrist, broken clavicle, and 2 broken ribs. Home security alarm went off. I halfway woke up thinking it was my alarm clock. Hit snooze, alarm still blaring. My phone rang. Security company was calling to see if I needed police. I found my glasses, but couldn't get my gun safe open because now I'm shaking and scared to death. Finally it recognizes my fingerprint, so I'm armed in one hand with my phone in the other. Stupid. Alarm is still blaring. I clear the upstairs, keeping the bored security lady on the line while I nearly shit myself with every step. I make it to the alarm. It reads basement door. Fuck. There are 2 basement doors, but in the moment I can't remember which one is labeled basement door. I check the first one, there's no way it's been opened. I inch my way to the second one. Deadbolt locked. So I'm thinking a creeper is in the house and has locked the doors behind him. When down floats a feather from between the sensors. A fucking feather set off the alarm. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Woken up from a dead sleep by a girl screaming bloody murder outside my apartment on a Monday morning around 3 a.m. She kept screaming no. Stop. Over and over. I've been in combat and I'm a cop, and I've never heard screaming like that. It was so urgent and chilling. I grabbed my pistol and ran outside in my underwear before I could even open my eyes all the way. As soon as I came running around the corner to the street where the screaming was coming from, I heard car doors slam and saw a car peel off and speed away. It all happened so fast I couldn't get a description of the car or plate. My eyes were still trying to focus and I was still half asleep. I never saw the people involved. Creeped me out for a long time, and I still feel bad that maybe I got outside seconds too late and couldn't stop whatever was happening. I would have thought it was a dream, but apparently it woke up the neighbors and a good number of them were looking out their windows and saw me. Later a few of them commented on my red underwear. I had 2 cases of sleep paralysis 2 nights in a row. The first night was a few weeks after we had moved to our new house, so I was down on the ground, on just a mattress. I had just my phone and my lamp next to me at the time. My phone was playing some music when I woke up, very calm and nice, when all of a sudden, with no sound at all, it looked like somebody was pulling the sheet over my head. It was incredibly dark, so all I saw was this sheet and the person's hands. At the very moment the sheet passed over my eyes, I gained control of my body parts, and thrust my hands in the air, screaming, "Who are you?" I turned on my lamp. Everything was gone. I just sat there for 30 minutes before falling asleep with my lamp on. The next night I fell back asleep very tentatively. I got sleep paralysis yet again, however. This time, it was early morning with just a sliver of light coming into my room. I saw a person who looked just like my mom staring out my window. I was only paralyzed for a few minutes, before asking why mom was staring out my window. The person didn't respond. I turned on my lamp, and they were gone. I didn't sleep downstairs for the rest of the summer. Our house is upside down. Bedrooms downstairs, living room upstairs. Not me but a friend. During freshman year of college, he flew up to Seattle to meet his GF, while telling his parents that it was a fraternity conference/event. On the third day he was there, he and his GF went on a double-date camping trip on Mount Rainier. So they drove down to the campgrounds and then hiked to set up tent. A few hours had passed and they were stargazing or something. Being out in the wilderness with no cell service and just the four of them caused my friend to have a sudden realization that a long-distance relationship with this girl wasn't going to work. So he decided to break it off with her. Unfortunate for him, he chose the exact wrong moment to do it. So at 2 a.m., he decides to pull her out of the tent and have a talk with her. They talk for a solid 30 to 45 minutes, and during that time she was flaming furious. At the end of the conversation, she tells him to grab his bags and wait on the trail. Not wanting to upset her further, he obliged and waited for her to get back from the tent. She comes back with an axe/machete or whatever you use to chop wood for a campfire, and pointed it at him and told him to walk. And he walked all the way to the entrance of the park. At that point, she simply said bye, turned around and walked back to their camp. So my friend's lost in the middle of nowhere, with an almost dead phone, since he had no way to charge it and nowhere to go. So he started walking more, hoping he'd reach a main road and figure something out from there. Nope. He walked in the opposite direction, and had to deal with the freezing cold. The howling and wildlife noises weren't helping either. He was scared shitless and thought he was gonna die. The sun rose and he kept walking, and had been walking for 3-ish hours, now aware of the bear shit on the road and was scared of that as well. He stumbled upon a really old, rusty pickup truck and just set his bags in the bed and sat there, hoping someone would return. About 15 minutes later, a big-ass 6 feet 6 inches 300 pounds dude hops out of the cabin and asks my friend if he was alright. My friend tells him his story, and the old dude asks what he wanted to do. My friend asks him if he could drop him to downtown Seattle. The dude politely refuses, as his car didn't have enough gas to go that far, but offers to take my friend back to his cabin. My friend really had no option, but he reluctantly accepted, afraid that he was gonna get raped or kidnapped or something. But he was wrong. The dude fixed him breakfast, let him charge his phone, everything. He was like an angel. But my friend was still stuck in the middle of nowhere. To get out he had to call his frat brothers from the UW chapter, and they were nice enough to drive down to pick him up. I've got one. A little backstory first. Was staying with a friend in Michigan. He just moved into this house. There was a basement and it had this weird room in it with a cage that locked from the outside. It had a little window slit in it that looked like it was a peephole or for sliding things in it. Kind of like a peephole that's a big square window with a little door on it. I'm not sure what they're called. Anyways, my friend thought it was just strange that was down there, and insisted he heard voices the first night he stayed alone there. A few weeks later, I stayed the weekend with him, and slept in the guest room. I had my bedroom door open, so the cat could come and go as she pleased. The cat was in bed with me at the time. It was just a little after 3 a.m., I'm lying in bed just browsing on my tablet, and suddenly I hear an incredibly loud slam or bang. It scared me more than anything. The cat ran out of the room like a bat out of hell. I went into my friend's room and woke him up. He said he didn't hear anything and said it was probably the cat. I said no, she was beside me and ran out when it happened. Mind you, I was upstairs as was my friend asleep. The noise came from below. It sounded as if someone had dropped an incredibly heavy washing machine or other major appliance. There wasn't anything in the house to make such loud noises. Next day, I told him the story again and we decided to record the basement for a few hours. We got some weird sounds that could be EVPs, and heard what we thought were voices chattering, but it could be our imaginations running wild with the creeps. Either way, that incident genuinely freaked me out. I slept the rest of the weekend on an air mattress in my friend's room, beside his bed. He's told me stories since then about incidents happening, but none as scary as that. I was dead asleep and heard someone crying outside my bedroom window. It wasn't a rare occurrence because my bedroom window faced the entrance to our apartment building, and we weren't in the best neighborhood, but this time it sounded different, not people arguing or drunk crying like normal. I got up and looked through the blinds and saw a man on the ground and a woman crying over him. I went to my front door. It faced the inner courtyard of the apartment building. When I opened it, I saw a huge fire in the second floor diagonally across from me. I ran back in the apartment screaming to wake up my BF and my sister and her BF to get them all out. Once we were outside, I realized we were the only ones who knew, so we started banging on doors and called 911. Luckily everyone got out okay, but about 1/4 of the apartment building was destroyed. One family had to jump from the second floor into the bed of some trucks below and throw their kids out the window to other parent before jumping. It was intense, and we were not allowed back into the surviving units until a day later. Apparently a grease fire had started in the apartment of the people crying outside of my window. The man had tried to put it out but was burned and passed out from the smoke. The woman dragged him down the stairs and out the front door of the building, and that's when I woke up. I will never forget the sound of the fire. It was loud as hell. I used to deliver bread at night. This was a small bakery. I was the only one in there packing the bread and loading it to the truck before I went and make my deliveries. Every once in a while the toilet we had in the back of the bakery would flush on its own, and we also had a doorbell in the front of the building connected to the back door where I would load the truck, but that doorbell didn't work, it was broken. But on the same nights the toilet flushed, that doorbell would ring too. It freaked me the fuck out. This bakery was definitely haunted. I always rushed packing all my bread to get out of there as soon as possible after the first time. But what freaked me out the most was one day the owner hired a new baker, and when he came in to work the owner was showing him around, and this guy starts walking in circles looking up at the ceiling telling the owner, I'm sorry sir, but I can't work here," and just like that he took off without any explanation. Sleep paralysis episode, probably. Freaky shit. Or that time where one of our neighbor, big apartment building, came banging at our door wanting us to open it, lol no, then after insisting for a while, she proceeded to tell us her friend needed an ambulance and she wanted to get in. Yeah. No. At that point I found it hard to believe her, since her first request had been to open the door and let her in. After that she would not leave even when we yelled at her to go away and told her we'd call the cops. I ended up calling the ambulance for her friend, making it very clear to the dispatcher I had no idea whether or not the need for an ambulance was legit, and I was not to be charged for wrongly calling an ambulance if that was bull, and the cops for the crazy chick who would not quit banging my door. I was unable to find sleep afterward, because home invasion is my absolute biggest phobia, and I was just panicking at the thought that she could come in somehow. The afternoon after she came to thank me for the ambulance and apologize. Turns out, she was panicking herself because she had been drinking heavily with her friend, then said friend fell and would not wake up, ethylene coma, and their cell phones were dead, and she was quite intoxicated herself, so she did not know what else to do to get help for her friend. I for one was glad she came, explained herself and apologized, because I would not have felt comfortable walking around the hallway not knowing what's up with this fury that came banging at my door in the middle of the night. After a night of celebrating a friend's birthday, with lots of good company, we returned home. The way home was awfully spooky. The winds were so strong that it was jeering the car in different directions. This was about 10 p.m. Get home around 10:30, and notice that it smells like someone is cooking outside. Smells like coals. Who would be cooking this late? Anyway, I say fuck it and eat half of a very strong weed cookie. I didn't have to work the next day and I'll have an edible no more than 5x a year. I was feeling great and went off to bed. 3 a.m. The alarm in our house was going off. My girlfriend woke up and started to shake me up. I feel an intense adrenaline rush, grab my knife under the bed and go to see what's happening. There's no power, nothing, just a piercing shrill of an alarm. We turn it off and try to figure out what's happening. After my macho man feeling wore off, I feel the effect of the edible and I'm literally brought to the ground on all 4 limbs. I could barely walk anymore. I was so high, dizzy, and a little panicked at what just happened. It's all good though, power is just off, right? Wrong. 3 minutes later we get a call from our friend. She never calls us. Of course we answer, and first thing she says after we say hello is, "Are you still in Napa?" Yes? Why, what's wrong? Therese, this huge fire up there, get the fuck out please, you need to leave, just go. That fire smell from last night at 10 a.m. was just a little taste of what was to come. While my girlfriend was still talking to her, I sort of crawled to the window and opened up the blinds. The sight of the fires is something that will never leave me. The hills were glowing, the sky was red, and it was literally raining ashes. The smell was 10x stronger now. Fear kicked in, and we tried to shove our lives into a go bag in 10 minutes. That was fucking surreal, knowing there's a chance that our place may not be there whenever we get back, to get what you can in 10 minutes and leave. What made it scarier looking back at it was how long this lasted with no hope from any officials. All the live streams and statements for close to a week was about how big these fires were, that there was no progress on containment, and they're just trying to stay ahead and evacuate people. That was a terrible day for so many people, and that'll stick with me for the rest of my life, until something worse happens at 3 a.m. 10 years old, I was alone when my grandma went to get us Taco Bell. She called and said she got into an accident and she's okay, but she'll be late, so I just go to bed because it's like 9 at night. And I had school the next day, cue me getting up late at night to go pee. I go and do my business, finish and go back to bed, and I hear a sound, "Don't close your eyes pretty," and I'm on the verge of shitting myself. From the sound I know he's under my bed. I'm quietly bawling my eyes out. He then says, "Do you know what I'm going to do to you?" After that, I toss my blankets so he can't snatch my leg and I dart for the door. It was winter, so I had like 6 blankets on me that night, and I run to my grandma's room and panic explain to her a man is under my bed. My grandma had her husband serve in WW2, but he passed away when I was 3, due to a collapsed lung during his sleep. So my grandma, pulling her survival instincts, locks the door and goes to her closet and opens a bin. Sure as shit she pulls out some old ass shotgun and shells. She then threatens him she has a gun, and he claims she doesn't. She fires a shell through the door and we hear running, and the front door slamming shut. It turns out he broke the back door's glass door with a branch and entered. Keep in mind the back door is by the laundry room, and it's rarely used anymore. To this day I take 15 minutes to check my whole entire room and lock my door.